Two of our PhD students finished their PhD this year, and it's sort of, they worked in the garden route. And so it's Alice Bernard and Elie Pedaros. And then it just gave us and an opportunity to reflect on the dynamics of the conservation in the landscape. And something that struck me in all the discussion we've had with the team and the students is the ever-presence of critical biodiversity areas as a unit in the landscape that never really gets addressed. So I thought maybe it was a good opportunity to build a case for CBAs through some of their results, and then just share some of my thinking around that. So let me take you through my journey into thinking about CBAs while reviewing these PhD work. So we've heard the whole day about sharing space, and there's a conceptual sort of framework that emerged called the shared earth, which is really like being some form of an alternative vision to conservation, to the 30 by 30, where basically 30% of the planet would be really protected under strict protection. And the shared earth vision is really like thinking that we can do a lot of protections in more people-driven conservation landscapes, where all the area that's in the shared landscape could be turned into biodiversity-friendly units, still with people sharing the earth, and probably having different value systems and other voices heard, but definitely also achieving probably more than the 30 by 30 target for biodiversity. Obviously, the shared earth sort of vision requires maybe alternative values to the one that dominates the world today, maybe also incentives for sharing the space. Maybe change in legal frameworks, we've heard about things, maybe new design, we've just heard about that. And critical biodiversity areas are an instrument in South Africa to try to promote sharing of space, as well as conservation of biodiversity. So it's an interesting item that we should maybe pay attention to. They are identified through a systematic biodiversity planning approach. So it's pretty well sort of embedded into the landscape planning and the land use planning. And they thought to represent one of the most land efficient options to meet all the different thresholds in terms of development and conservation and everything. And the purpose of mapping the CBA and provide the guidelines is from SANBI's point of view, try to mainstream biodiversity into land use planning and decision making by identifying the critical sites that needs to be conserved while in a development dynamics. So there are a couple of things that differ in critical biodiversity areas, but basically it's always about try to maintain natural or near-natural states, prevent the loss of habitats, promote rehabilitation. So it's basically try to address low-impact land uses. And there's also functionality. So how do you maintain functional ecosystem thanks to them? And I was just thinking that for mobile species, CBAs also imply increased connectivity and the presence of refuge areas in less transformed and less sort of disturbed human-dominated landscapes. So I was just thinking, using the data from these two PhDs, are the CBAs doing their job? I'm not the first one to think about that question. There's a team of colleagues that have been looking at the role of critical biodiversity in reducing biodiversity loss outside protected areas in South Africa. They mostly focus on habitat loss, like plant diversity or plant conversion outside protected area, and they actually concluded that it was quite a nice tool to reduce the rate of habitat loss outside protected areas. But I was more focused on the mammals that inhabit these open landscapes, and I was just thinking, can we see whether CBAs are doing their job by looking at what sort of mammals use the CBAs? Can we consider them as refuges for people that tend to stay close to CBAs and maybe just use CBAs to persist in human-dominated landscape? And because CBAs are promoting habitat conservation, rehabilitation, I was thinking, are CBAs actually a good tool to promote these on properties and hence promote conservation of large mammals into a private property mosaic? And obviously you've heard about the landscape we're in. It's ideal, it's open. There's the 𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿 National Park that has a lot of fragmented sections, and there's a massive network of CBAs connecting a lot of the units in the middle of the private properties, in the middle of plantations. So it's actually quite an ideal situation, the 𝐷𝐸𝐻 National Park and its surrounding, to try to test the idea of the role of these critical biodiversity areas. And there's also enough diversity of mammals to think about whether we can see a signal. If you only had 2 species, it might be a bit difficult, but we have a diversity. A couple of them are missing, but still different diets and sizes, and whether more nocturnal. And so we thought it would be nice to use them because they're mobile to different levels to try to understand the role of these CBAs. So I've compiled data from Alice's PhD, which she uses a grid, a survey grid, combining landowner surveys and camera trap surveys, and some areas where she combined the two. And we also use data from Eli Padoros' PhD, and actually also his MSc, using participatory mapping to understand where species were seen by people. So combining these two studies, I'm trying to show you the picture of what it looks like. So if we're looking at camera trap surveys, for instance, and an interesting habitat suitability and habitat use modeling made by Alice, some species you would expect might prefer protected areas and CBAs, and others actually don't show any type of interest. So the green, light green, is the probability of seeing the species into a CBA compared to the protected area and then no protection status. So like leopard, for instance, both in summer and winter, you're more likely to see them in conservation area or in the CBAs. And very ubiquitous bushbuck, for instance, doesn't show any difference. Some other species seem to do well and use CBAs associated with their use of non-protected area, especially in more agriculture transformed landscapes. CBAs may be used as refuges there. And some of them might actually even prefer to stay in CBAs while they roam in these landscapes. Participatory maps are telling us something a bit similar about refuges. Baboons, bushpucks, bushbucks, vervet monkeys, they all occur more in CBAs or closer to CBA and tends to not select for habitat too far from them. So it fits very well with the functional unit that we can call a refuger, where they stay close, still can use the areas around, but can retreat back easily into these refuges. And obviously for some of these species, you'd understand very well that they might be very attracted to use anthropogenic resources maybe, and then use the refuges also as a tool to persist in the landscapes. And what do landowners tell us? They tell us that there are actually 247 landowners that responded to the survey monkey for Alice tell us that they see a lot of wildlife on their properties. And on average, at least 6 species per property, and they saw the 16 species that we listed in the study. And interesting enough, they also tell us that on their property, if they have a lot of diversity and integrity of habitats, and if they have reduced their footprints, their development footprints, they have more species. They're also telling us that most species respond differently, but if you look at diversity and integrity of natural habitat on properties, the likelihood to get quite a good proportion of species is very high, and so is the case for human footprints, which means that incentivizing habitat restoration and limited space for of infrastructure development on properties is actually conducive to promoting the diversity of mammals in the area. So CBAs are doing the job, I think. They're well used by a majority of species. They even have species that use them to dwell in human transfer habitats. They act as, I think, as refuges. So maybe there's some drawbacks with the problem of conflict sometimes. There's even seasonality in the use, which suggests that they respond to functional needs, which I think is a very good thing. The importance of habitat diversity and integrity and limited human footprint in these TBAs is actually in properties is supporting the role of CBAs to push towards property owners to actually have better habitat diversity and integrity. So it should be a great tool. I think they are very useful. That's what I would take. And they're not just useful to reduce habitat loss like the study that I showed, but they also restrict the footprints and disturbance. So they're really useful for large mammal diversity. They probably have a big issue is that they lack the sort of legal binding, the strong regulatory status that makes owners that they're forced to do something. But I think they definitely are a tool that we should promote. Even estate agents do not necessarily inform buyers about the fact that their property partly is a CBA. So that means people don't necessarily are aware of the fact that their property is also falling in a critical biodiversity area. So they might not be using all their knowledge to actually restore their own properties. And I think, for me, CBAs are a bit like grid. Say, they are uncomfortable spaces because they're private, but they are also of public interest and consideration. So they connect, but they are not gazetted like corridors. They allow flow of exchange between disconnected areas without obstructing their internal dynamics, because you can still develop your property as long as you maintain the CBA and you restore habitats there. Eventually, they can even transform connected areas by setting new trajectory for future development or conservation actions, which I think is great. So I think I love the CBAs like I love GRIN, and I think we should use them much more. Thank you.